Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. In this video, I will show you how to connect to Amazon DynamoDB using AWS PrivateLink. Before we dive into AWS PrivateLink for Amazon DynamoDB, let me quickly introduce about myself. My name is Thirumavalavan Srinivasan and I have over 20 years of IT industry experience. I am also an AWS community builder. And these are the AWS certifications that I have achieved in the past. And I am also an ex-AWS partner AIML Black Belt and ex-AWS partner ambassador. I think that's enough introduction about me. Now let's quickly see what Amazon DynamoDB is. Amazon DynamoDB is a serverless, NoSQL, fully managed database service that enables you to develop modern applications at any scale. Amazon DynamoDB supports both key value and document data models. As a serverless database, you only pay for what you use, and DynamoDB scales to zero, has no cold starts, no version upgrades, no maintenance windows, no patching, and no downtime maintenance. DynamoDB offers a broad set of security controls and compliance standards. For globally distributed applications, DynamoDB Global Tables is a multi-region, multi-active database with a 99.999% availability SLA and increased resilience. That is 5 nines of availability. DynamoDB reliability is supported with managed backups, point-in-time recovery, and more. With DynamoDB streams, you can build serverless event-driven applications. Now let's quickly see the gateway endpoints for Amazon DynamoDB. With a gateway endpoint, you can access DynamoDB from your VPC without requiring an internet gateway or NAT device for your VPC. This is the only way to access DynamoDB for your in-VPC resources if they need to go through private network without having, if you don't have an internet gateway or NAT device, and this is the only way, that is gateway endpoint. But recently Amazon started supporting AWS PrivateLink for both S3 and DynamoDB. So in this video, I will show you both gateway endpoint and interface endpoint and how to set it up to access Amazon DynamoDB from both in-VPC resources and from on-premises resources. There is no additional charge for using gateway endpoints. That's the added point. So if you're setting up an architecture to access in-VPC resources, setting up a gateway endpoint is the best way to go. But if you have on-premises resources that needs to be accessed through private network, then you need to set up AWS PrivateLink for DynamoDB. For on-premises private network connectivity to gateway endpoints, customers often set up proxy servers or firewall rules to route and restrict traffic to DynamoDB, as gateway endpoints are not compatible with AWS Direct Connect or AWS Virtual Private Network. The additional infrastructure setup can increase operational load and complexity while complicating compliance in some cases. Customers have asked for a solution that enables setting up private network connectivity for on-premises workloads with DynamoDB without needing additional proxy infrastructure. That's where AWS PrivateLink comes in. Let's quickly talk about AWS PrivateLink for Amazon DynamoDB. Amazon DynamoDB now supports AWS PrivateLink. With AWS PrivateLink, you can simplify private network connectivity between virtual private clouds, DynamoDB, and your on-premises data centers using interface VPC endpoints and private IP addresses. AWS PrivateLink is compatible with AWS Direct Connect and AWS Virtual Private Network to facilitate private network connectivity and helps you eliminate the need to use public IP addresses, configuring firewall rules, or configuring an internet gateway to access DynamoDB from your on-premises data centers. As a result, AWS PrivateLink helps you maintain compliance for your AWS DynamoDB workloads over the private network. We can use low-cost private network connectivity by using gateway endpoints for in-VPC network traffic. So for example, if you have EC2 instance that needs to access Amazon DynamoDB using private network connectivity, so we can set up gateway endpoints. And we can use interface endpoints for on-premises network traffic to DynamoDB. So if you have instances that needs to access Amazon DynamoDB from your on-premises network, then you may want to set up interface endpoints that uses AWS PrivateLink. Now let's quickly see the architecture that we are going to implement in this demo. So imagine you have your corporate data centers on your left and AWS Cloud on your right. And we have AWS Region and AWS Virtual Private Cloud, that is VPC. And I have already set up a Amazon DynamoDB table for this demo. And I have also created an EC2 instance in private subnet without any public IP address. So the only way for the VPC instance to access Amazon DynamoDB is either via interface endpoints that uses AWS PrivateLink or gateway endpoints. As I have already talked, so if you want to implement the low-cost implementation, so you can set up a gateway endpoint connection, for the in-VPC resources to access Amazon DynamoDB, and we can set up AWS PrivateLink, that is interface endpoint for on-premises systems to access Amazon DynamoDB. So both interface endpoints and gateway endpoints supports private network connectivity without needing to have a public IP address or internet gateway or NAT device. So I will show you both gateway endpoints and interface endpoints in this demo. So I will show you both the ways to connect. Since I have already told you I have created VPC instances, one Amazon private EC2 instance in private subnet, I will set up a gateway endpoint and access Amazon DynamoDB using gateway endpoint from my EC2 instance. And for the on-premises instances to access Amazon DynamoDB using AWS PrivateLink, first we need to have direct connect or VPN. But I have already set up a VPN connection. If you need to know how to set up AWS client VPN, please refer my channel. I already have a video on how to set up AWS client VPN, and I will also give you a link for the video in the description. So once we have that VPN connection established, we can have AWS PrivateLink, that is interface endpoint setup, and we can access Amazon DynamoDB from the on-premises system using interface endpoint without any public IP address. So this is the architecture that we are going to implement in this video. Okay, I have now logged into AWS Management Console, and let me quickly show you around the infrastructure that I have already created. Let me first go to Amazon DynamoDB. I'll open it in a new tab. Let's go to tables, and I have created a table named music. It only has 3 items. I can show explore table items. It shows all 3 items. And let's go back to console home. Let's go to VPC, and go to your VPCs, and I have a VPC created named private VPC, and the other one is my default VPC. If I go into subnets and sort by VPC, and I only have two subnets and US East 1A and US East 1B availability zones. And if you go to a route table, let me sort it and go to routes. I only have the default route for the local network. Let me go to the second route table, the routes. So I only have the default, the local route. So I don't have any internet gateway. This internet gateway is attached to my default VPC. I don't have any internet gateway for my private VPC. And if I go into NAT gateways, I don't have any NAT device or NAT gateway for my private VPC. So I don't have any connection to outside internet from my private VPC. So let's go back to console home and let me go to EC2. Let me go to instances. And I have created an EC2 instance on my private VPC. It doesn't have any public IPv4 address. It only has private IPv4 address, that is 10.0.155.70. Let's connect to the private EC2 instance. I'm going to use EC2 Instance Connect endpoint. I have already set up the EC2 Instance Connect endpoint, so I can connect to it. Like if you don't know how to set up EC2 Instance Connect endpoint, I already have created a video. Please refer to that video in my channel. I can give you the link for that video in the description also. So let's connect using EC2 Instance Connect endpoint. So I have now connected to the private EC2 instance using EC2 Instance Connect endpoint. If you remember the IP address for my EC2 instance, it's 10.0.155.70. So to access Amazon DynamoDB from in-VPC resources, that is EC2 instances, we can either set up interface endpoint or gateway endpoint. But as I have already said in the video, for in-VPC resources, setting up gateway endpoint is the low-cost option. For the on-premises instances, we can set up interface endpoint, but for in-VPC network, gateway endpoint is low-cost option. So let's go to VPC. Yeah, here it is. And let's go to endpoints. So I already have one endpoint, that is the EC2 Instance Connect endpoint, to connect to the private EC2 instance that doesn't have any public IPv4 address. So let's go ahead and create an endpoint. Let me name it as my gateway endpoint 1. Search the service DynamoDB. It gives both the options. You can set up interface endpoint or gateway endpoint. But first let me set up the gateway endpoint so we can access Amazon DynamoDB from our EC2 instance. This is the low cost option. Let me select my private VPC and let me select the route tables. I'm going to select both private 1 and private 2 route tables. For the policy, I'm going to give full access for this demo, but in your ideal environment, we don't want to give full access. I've created the endpoint and it is created and it's available, it's immediate. Now let me go to the route tables. And let me refresh the screen. And if you select private 1 route table and select the routes, if you remember earlier I only had the route to the local network. Now I have the new entry added. that is the VPC endpoint. The same for the private to route table. So now we have that gateway endpoint added here on the route table. Now let's go to the EC2 instance connect endpoint. So now I connected to the private EC2 instance, but if you try to access the Amazon DynamoDB, you will not be able to access it. We have set up the connection for the EC2 instance to access Amazon DynamoDB using gateway endpoint, but we don't have authorization to access Amazon DynamoDB. So we can either set the give authorization by giving the credentials. We can do it like by setting saving your access key using AWS configure, but that's not the ideal solution. If anyone access the EC2 instance, they will have access to your access keys. I'll show you here. You see, yeah, it says unable to locate credentials. You can configure credentials by running AWS configure. We don't want to do that. The ideal way to do is set up a role. So let's go to console home, and let me go to IAM, identity and access management. Let me go into roles, and let me create a role, and the service that's going to use is EC2, and the policy is for DynamoDB. Let's search for DynamoDB. For this demo, let me select Amazon DynamoDB full access. For the name, let me give DynamoDB access for EC2 and create the role. I created the role. Now let me go to EC2 instances and go to actions and security. Yeah, I have to select the instance first. Yeah, it's not selected. Actions, security, and modify IAM rule. So let me select the role DynamoDB access for EC2 and update IAM role. Now if you go to the EC2 instance, it should work. It works. I'm able to list the table on this region, and I can run a get item, yeah, that works. And I will also see run a query. I gave an extra slash. I shouldn't have given that. Yeah, now I'm able to retrieve it. I can run the query. So now let's go to the VPC console and go to endpoints. Now let's create another endpoint. This is my interface endpoint. Let me name it as my interface endpoint for DynamoDB and select the service again as DynamoDB. This time let me select interface, select the VPC, that's the private VPC, and I'm going to select both my subnets. I'm not going to do any additional settings, and for the security group I'm going to select the default security group for this VPC. For the policy, I'm going to leave it as full access for this demo. For the protection environment, we don't want to set the full access. Okay, so I have now created the interface endpoint, but it is in pending state. It will take a while, so I'll pause the video and come back once it becomes available. Okay, the interface endpoint is created and the status is available now. And if you see, it has 3 DNS names, one for the region specific DNS name, that is for US East 1A, and the other 2 are for the availability zone specific DNS names. This one is for US East 1B, the other one is for US East 1A, but we don't want to use the availability zone specific endpoints, so I'm going to use the region specific DNS names. I copied it into the clipboard so I can generate the command to run. So let me open my terminal. I have the terminal opened here, and I have also connected to my AWS VPN client. It is connected. So I'm going to run the command to list the table. You see, I'm running AWS DynamoDB and the region is US East 1. I'm going to list tables and I'm going to use the endpoint https:// and the DNS name, and I'm going to use my profile. I already configured my profile on my terminal. And it lists the table. I'm going to quit and let me run the get item command. This time also I'm going to run this using the endpoint, interface endpoint. I'm not going to go through the internet. Yep, I can get it. And next let me run a query. Yep, it works. I got it. And I quit. So in this video, I have showed you how to access Amazon DynamoDB using gateway endpoint and interface endpoint via the private network. So, we have used the gateway endpoint for the EC2 instance to access Amazon DynamoDB. That is, like if you need to access in VPC resources, we can use the low cost option, that is the gateway endpoint. So that doesn't need any public IP address or internet gateway or NAT devices or NAT gateway. So we can access Amazon DynamoDB from our private EC2 instance using gateway endpoints. For our on-premises instance, we can use interface endpoints that uses AWS PrivateLink that goes through AWS VPN or Direct Connect. If you think you have got something out of this video, please like this video, subscribe to my channel for more AWS related contents. Thank you for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Thank you. Bye.